All right, ready to dive in. Today we're cracking open Tools of Titans, a book jam-packed with unconventional wisdom from some seriously impressive people. We're talking athletes, entrepreneurs, even a few comedians chiming in with their secrets to success.
Yeah, it's not your typical self-help book. We're talking about routines and philosophies of world-class performers, people who've really reached the peak of their fields. We're going to be digging into what makes them tick and, more importantly, how listeners can apply these kind of out-there approaches to their own lives.
Sounds like a plan. Where do we even begin with a book like this? There's so much to unpack.
Let's start with health, but not just any health advice. We're talking insights from extreme athletes, people who push their bodies to the absolute limit. Like Amelia Boone, for example. She's a legend in the world of obstacle course racing. And we're not talking about your average jog in the park here. Think fire, barbed wire, 90-mile courses, the works.
Obstacle course racing. That's intense. So what's Boone's secret weapon for, not completely falling apart after one of those races?
She's all about what she calls precovery. It's not just recovering after you've pushed yourself, but actively preventing those injuries in the first place. Her go-to: a blend of beetroot powder and hydrolyzed gelatin.
Hold on, beetroot powder. Okay, I'm intrigued, but also maybe a little grossed out.
Don't knock it till you try it. Beetroot is naturally packed with nitric oxide, which helps with blood flow and can seriously reduce muscle soreness. And the hydrolyzed gelatin, just a fancy way of saying broken down collagen, which is great for your joints.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So it's all about giving your body the building blocks it needs to handle those crazy workouts.
Exactly. And Boone's not alone in her, let's say, unique approach to health. Let's talk about Wim Hof, better known as the Iceman. This guy climbed Mount Everest in shorts. His secret: ice baths.
The Iceman. I've heard of him. Isn't he all about cold exposure?
He is, and while most of us wouldn't dream of taking a polar plunge, there's some pretty fascinating science behind cold exposure. Studies show it can boost your immune system, help you manage your weight, even improve your mood.
So are you suggesting I should swap my morning coffee for a dip in a frozen lake?
I admire your enthusiasm, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. You don't have to go full Iceman to benefit. Even a quick blast of cold water at the end of your shower can make a difference. Start small. See how you feel.
Okay, that feels a bit more doable than scaling Everest in my swim trunks. But this brings up an interesting point. What works for an extreme athlete might not work for the average person. So how do we know what's right for us when it comes to health?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's something that Dr. Justin Major, another titan in the book, really emphasizes. He's a physician who's worked with Olympians and CEOs, and he argues there's no one-size-fits-all approach to health, like with cholesterol, for example. We're always told to keep it low, but Dr. Major suggests that high cholesterol might actually be beneficial for building muscle, at least in certain contexts.
Wait, really? That goes against everything we've ever been told.
It does, doesn't it? But that's exactly his point. We need to question those blanket statements and figure out what actually works best for our own bodies, our own goals. He's all about experimentation, finding what makes you feel your best.
So it's about tuning into your own body and not being afraid to challenge the conventional wisdom.
Exactly. And speaking of challenging conventions, we have James Fadiman. He is a researcher in the field of psychedelics. And, like Dr. Major, he advocates for this try it and see approach, but in a completely different way.
Okay, now we're really getting into uncharted territory.
We are. And just to be clear, we are absolutely not recommending anyone experiment with substances without professional guidance.
Agreed. Safety first.
Always. But Fadiman's perspective really highlights how important it is to question our assumptions, to be open to different paths to well-being. For example, one of his friends microdoses ibogaine, a naturally occurring psychedelic, and reports increased empathy and overall well-being.
So while we're definitely not endorsing drug use, it's about being open to possibilities and approaching health with a curious, discerning mind.
Exactly. It's about taking ownership of your health, educating yourself, and then making informed decisions that feel right for you.
Okay, so we've talked about pushing those physical and mental limits in terms of health. But what about wealth? Does Tools of Titans offer any of that unconventional wisdom when it comes to, money matters?
It does, and this is where things get really interesting. Let's talk about Chris Sacca, a venture capitalist who's made some big bets on companies you've definitely heard of, like Twitter and Uber. Now, you might think his path to success was, paved with privilege, but not quite.
Oh, Really? Tell me more about that.
Well, his parents had, let's just say, a unique approach to motivating their kids. They made Chris and his siblings work what they considered the worst jobs imaginable.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Cleaning septic tanks, collecting garbage, you name it, they probably did it.
Wow. Talk about tough love. What was the reasoning behind that?
They wanted to give their kids this stark contrast between those jobs and the opportunities that come with higher education, with pursuing your passions. It was about instilling a sense of drive and ambition, the idea that if you don't work hard, this could be your life.
So sometimes a little dose of reality, even if it's unpleasant, can be the push we need to reach for something more.
Absolutely. It all comes down to perspective. And speaking of perspective, author Seth Godin, another titan in the book, reminds us to keep track of our wins no matter how small they may seem.
That's so important. It's easy to get caught up in those to-do lists and feel like you're never doing enough.
Exactly. But if you don't take the time to acknowledge those accomplishments, you risk losing sight of your progress, feeling stuck or discouraged.
Right, so it's about celebrating those small victories along the way, those moments of bravery, of kindness, or even just getting through a tough day.
Exactly. Those small wins build momentum and help you stay motivated, especially when you face those inevitable setbacks.
And speaking of setbacks, it feels like chasing goals gets a lot of emphasis these days. But Tools of Titans seems to have a slightly different take on that.
Yeah, Dilbert creator Scott Adams actually argues for focusing on systems, not goals. So it's about developing consistent habits and routines that support your growth instead of being fixated on that specific outcome.
So instead of saying, I want to be a successful photographer, I should be focusing on building a system that supports that goal, like taking a photo every day or learning a new editing technique each week, something like that.
Exactly. It's about playing the long game, investing in yourself, and trusting that the right opportunities will come along as long as you're continuing to hone your craft.
It's like they say, trust the process.
Mm.
But that's easier said than done, especially when you're facing uncertainty or self-doubt, which, let's be honest, happens to all of us. So what do these titans have to say about those moments when you feel like you're in over your head? How do they deal with that?
Well, let's talk about Olympic snowboarder Shaun White for a second. At just 15 years old, he went head-to-head with seasoned athletes, some were twice his age, who tried to pressure him into splitting the prize money at a competition in Japan.
Wait, seriously? He was just a kid. What did he do?
He trusted his gut, competed, and walked away with a cool $50,000. Talk about a bold move.
That's incredible. It takes serious guts to stand up for yourself, especially when you're young and surrounded by people who, on the surface, seem so much more experienced.
It does, and that boldness, that willingness to take risks and kind of defy expectations, that's a theme that comes up again and again in the book.
So it's not just about being talented or working hard. It's also about having the courage to, bet on yourself, even when others might doubt you.
Exactly. Take someone like Peter Diamandis, the founder of the XPRI's Foundation. He pretty much single-handedly secured funding for a $10 million prize for space exploration just through sheer determination. He had a vision and wasn't afraid to chase it, even when it seemed impossible.
That's so inspiring. But what about those of us who maybe weren't, born with that fearless go-getter attitude? Can you really learn to embrace risk?
Absolutely. It's like a muscle you can build over time. Start by taking small risks, stepping outside your comfort zone in manageable ways. And remember, every single successful person has faced fear and doubt. The difference is they didn't let those feelings stop them.
So it's not about being fearless, it's about feeling the fear and doing it anyway.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that discomfort, more often than not, is a sign of growth. And those leaps of faith, even when they're terrifying, often lead to the greatest rewards.
That's a powerful message. Okay, so we've talked about the importance of perspective, building systems, embracing risk. But life's not all about hustling and grinding, right? There's got to be room for fun, even a little bit of silliness.
Absolutely. And this is where things get a little unexpected. Ready for some wisdom from an unusual source.
Hit me.
Let's talk about Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, the comedic duo behind movies like Superbad and This Is the End.
Wait, what? The guys known for their, let's say, raunchy comedies are offering life advice now. I don't know what to do with this.
You might be surprised. Their approach to life and to creativity is actually really insightful. For example, they're big believers in the power of working with what you know.
So instead of trying to be someone you're not, embrace your own unique experiences and perspectives.
That's it. Think about Superbad. That movie was born out of their own awkward teenage experiences. They took those feelings of insecurity and turned them into comedic gold.
So it's okay to find humor in the messy, uncomfortable parts of life. Those experiences might actually be our greatest source of creative inspiration.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to mine your own life for stories, even the ones that make you cringe a little. There's gold in those hills, I promise.
That's actually really liberating. I love that. Even our most embarrassing moments can be transformed into something hilarious and relatable. Okay, so Seth and Evan, they're all about embracing your weirdness and finding the humor in the everyday. What else have they got?
Well, they also talk about using your emotions, even the uncomfortable ones, as fuel for creativity.
Makes sense. I mean, they're not exactly known for, like, feel-good movies, are they?
Exactly. They lean into those raw, vulnerable emotions and find humor in the unexpected. Which actually brings us to one of their more, shall we say, unconventional beliefs. They're big proponents of marijuana as a tool for creative exploration.
Okay, we need to add another disclaimer here.
Absolutely. We are definitely not advocating drug use here.
Oh,
Always important to be aware of the risks and make responsible choices for yourself.
agreed. But in the context of Tools of Titans, it's another example of these guys challenging conventional thinking, exploring different avenues for inspiration.
Exactly. It speaks to their willingness to experiment, to figure out what works for them, even if it's outside the norm, which, in a way, brings us full circle to our earlier conversations about, you know, embracing discomfort, questioning assumptions. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from beetroot juice and ice baths to the unexpected wisdom of comedic geniuses. What's the common thread? What ties all these titans together?
It seems like it's not just about what they do, but how they think. They're all incredibly driven and successful, but there's also this shared, like, willingness to challenge the status quo, to embrace discomfort, to really forge their own paths.
That's a great observation. And it brings us to another important aspect of success that's woven throughout this book, mindset. It's not just about setting goals and working hard, it's also about cultivating the right mental framework for navigating the challenges, the inevitable setbacks, and even success itself.
So having a mental game plan is just as important as any physical or strategic plan.
Exactly. One of the big takeaways from Tools of Titans is that our mindset isn't fixed. It's something we can actively cultivate, something we can shape.
Okay, so then how do we do that? How do we train our minds for success, Titan style?
Well, remember Chris Sacca's parents, their, let's call it unorthodox method of motivation, that whole work the worst job imaginable strategy.
Yeah, that was pretty intense.
It was, but it highlights a really powerful point. Our mindset is often shaped by our perspective. If we can shift our perspective even slightly, we can shift our entire experience.
It's like choosing to focus on the positive instead of, dwelling on the negative.
Exactly. And gratitude can be a really powerful tool for this kind of perspective shift. When you take the time to appreciate what you have, even the small things, it changes your whole outlook.
It's about finding those silver linings, even when things are tough.
Absolutely. And speaking of tough times, self-compassion, that's another essential element of a, let's say, success-oriented mindset.
That reminds me of Seth and Evan turning those awkward teenage years into, like, a hit movie. Sometimes those, insecurities we have, they can actually be our greatest strengths.
Exactly. It's about embracing our imperfections, those mess-ups, and treating ourselves with kindness even when we stumble.
Because, I mean, let's face it, we're all human,
Yeah.
right? We're all going to make mistakes, face challenges, experience setbacks.
Absolutely. And that's okay. In fact, those experiences often end up being our greatest teachers.
So it sounds like a Titan mindset is this combination of perspective, gratitude, self-compassion, and a healthy dose of, resilience.
That's a great way to put it. And the good news is these are all qualities that we can cultivate.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. We've gone from those extreme health hacks to the power of mindset and everything in between.
We've learned that success isn't a one-size-fits-all formula. It's about finding what works for you, embracing your unique journey, and, constantly learning and evolving along the way.
So for everyone listening, what resonated most with you from our exploration of Tools of Titans? What piece of unconventional wisdom will you be taking on board? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, keep pushing beyond your comfort zone.